care what the world think, don't do nothing they doing. Christ said they was gon' hate as soon as you became a new man. I just wanna keep it low. 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 Obedience, the love of God. 1 John 5:3. The scripture say it ain't hard.
Give me Exodus chapter 20. Because essentially, you've read the Bible, like, somewhat. So, like, you're familiar with, like, the story of, like, Moses, right? And how he went to go get the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt and get them out of slavery, right? But who actually was the one who was empowered and in charge to do that work? Well, God, right? Because Jesus is the Son of God, right? And so essentially, when he went to do that, he gave them a particular way to live that kept them separated from the rest of the world, right? Because basically, the children of Israel were supposed to be a great nation that were never supposed to be overtaken, right? But what happens is, through process of time, they disobeyed God, right? So start at verse 1 of Deuteronomy, right here, right here.
And God spake all these words, saying,
Good.
I'm the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
Right. So essentially, the Most High God gives these commands, right? And he's given them to them to separate them from the rest of, like, everybody else, because he's brought them out of the captivity, right? And so essentially, the rest of the Bible details how these people wind up disobeying God, right? And then, in fact, they go into captivity. Can you give me that in Jeremiah
17:4.
Yeah. So that
Yeah. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17 and verse 4. And thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever.
right. So his people disobeyed him and went away from the way he wanted them to go, right? And so essentially they go into a captivity, right? That's what you actually read in Jeremiah 29, if you can get that just in that first verse. And so what happens is they lose their heritage, as the scripture says, right? But do you know what that means? Because reading it in English don't really hold the same weight. So basically, it means they lost their land because they were given a land, right? And so, if I had to ask you, who do you believe the Israelites are today?
Different now.
So it's a group of people, right? Because they had a father, right? Abraham to Isaac and then to Jacob, right? You familiar with those? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so this is the same lineage that Christ, who the world calls Christ, came from, right? Because he's a descendant of David, who goes back to Judah, who is Jacob's son, right? And so essentially, this is telling that these people would go into slavery and lose their land. And then, can you give me Luke 21:24? But you got this?
You're talking about Jeremiah 29,
Yeah.
I think about 14. It says, and I will be found. How you doing, brother? Jeremiah 29:14. It says, and I will be found of you, saith the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord. And I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive.
Right. And so essentially, this is saying that the Most High God is going to carry his people back into the land after they've been carried away into slavery, right? And so what happens is we have a people over in Israel, right, today. And it says God's going to take them into the land. Now, those people who are there today, did God take them in that land? Nah. So the book details of a people who would be forgotten. If I had to ask you, what's your nationality? Now, you just named a continent, right? Africa's a continent, right? What place in Africa can you call home? And what place in America can you call home? Right. So if you had to think about it, we as a people don't have a place we can actually call home. We can't think of a place and track back to say, oh, you know what? This nation, right? We got the so-called black man. He says, oh, I'm a black man. We got the so-called Jamaican man. He says, oh, I'm Jamaican. But these people aren't Jamaican. They were slaves in these places, right? Can you get me that in Baruch? Because and you can read this here because Christ tells the people, right? And Christ means the anointed one. He tells the people that they're going to go into another captivity, right? Yeah.
This is Luke chapter 21, verse 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles unto the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Right. And so it says that our land would be overtaken by people who, it's not their land, right? And basically, we got two people fighting over a particular land right now who don't belong there because the Most High God didn't take them into that land, and Christ didn't come back and take them into that land, did he? Not that I know of. I heard a story about in 1948, they took people over there who were from Poland and put them in the land, right? And so that's not what the Bible says what happened to the children of Israel, right? So like from what we can see, that doesn't line up to be those people. But if we look at particular curses that deal with who the Israelites are today, we would line up with those people because the Bible tells us that we would be, scattered into all the nations, right? We wouldn't know who we are. We wouldn't know our former way. If we have to figure out about God, we have to go to a church and like kind of just trust that the pastor's teaching us the right thing, right? And the pastor will say things like, the law is done away with, right? We don't have to keep that old law. We just got to follow Christ, right? You've heard that before? But what did Christ say? Did Christ say that? Can you give me that in Matthew?
5.
Yeah, God. Matthew 5:17. Because essentially we got a dilemma on our hands because we're calling ourselves names that God wouldn't have called us, right? But you can read that.
This is the book of Matthew, chapter 5, and verse 17. Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill.
Right. And so essentially what Christ came to do, what the Messiah came to do, is to fulfill things that were written of him in the law and the prophets and the Psalms, as we read in the book of Luke, right? Because there were detailings of, there'll be, one out of your brethren that will carry the words of the Most High God, right? And so these things were going to happen, and they couldn't be stopped. And so he's letting them know, I'm not coming to take away any of this stuff, and it's not going to go anywhere until heaven and earth pass away. And that doesn't mean that heaven and earth are going to pass away. What it means is this stuff ain't going nowhere because heaven and earth is always going to be here. And so it's important for us to get back to the Most High God, right? And so, do you know what tonight is according to the scriptures? Can you get me? You still got Exodus? Can you get Exodus 20, verse 8? So, what number day of the week are we going into? The seventh day is the Sabbath, right? I mean, well, we're going into the seventh day, right?
This is the book of Exodus, chapter 20. I'll start at verse 8. It says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou shalt not, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates.
Right. So essentially, we're going in. Well, the Sabbath starts, or days start in the evening, right? according to the scriptures. Like, the evening and the morning were the first day, right? That's how time was detailed, right? So essentially, where the Sabbath started when the sun went down, and it goes until the next sundown, right? So tomorrow night at sundown, we'll start, your first day. But from tonight until tomorrow night, we're not supposed to do any work. We're supposed to keep that day separate. That's what the word holy means. The church usually teaches that holiness is, throwing on a three-piece suit, having a good shout, and, kind of being like very like what they call godly, right? But being holy is to be separate, right? And so essentially, when you get to look at these different words, you realize like, okay, I've been reading the scriptures, but I haven't been looking deep enough to see like what the true intent and what the true things that God is saying to us. And so it's important for us to reevaluate the scriptures and see what is it really saying and what did God tell me to do. And let me not just take somebody's word for it, but let me examine it for myself, right? Because everybody's going to teach you that, yeah, Jesus came and he took all that away. He took all those burdens away, and they'll utilize, people like Paul to kind of do that. But Paul doesn't teach that. He actually says, is the law done away with? Or is the law sin? And he says, God forbid. So basically saying, certainly not, right? And so it's important for, you, and I ain't going to hold you up too long, but it's important for us, to like, make sure we're looking at this the right way. What's your name, brother?
Andre.
Andre David, man. And
All right, man. Nice to meet you, bro.
yeah, I mean, if you want, we like to keep in touch with you, man, and share the word if that's cool with you.
When I repented, I know the angels rejoiced. I was living in wickedness and was sinning by choice. A lot of